Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Sarah Silverstein, and we're reporting live for another episode of CIEE Seville On Air. Today, in the spirit of Valentine's Day, we are recording a very special episode. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into CIEE love in Seville, and we're going to hear from a very special guest today. Today, we have our guest, Lauren Vachon. Welcome to the show, Lauren.
Thanks, Sarah. Excited to be here.
So happy to have you. I'm going to share a little bit about Lauren so we kind of have a picture, an idea of who we have on with us. So Lauren, whose study abroad experience started in fall 2012, set the stage for a life abroad. After graduating from Northeastern University in 2014, she made Spain her home, living mostly in Sevilla, with a 2-year stint in Madrid, while pursuing her MBA, where she began her job after graduating. Now, back in Sevilla, she works for an HR software company and lives not far from CIEE with her husband, whom she met while studying abroad. They've just celebrated 12 years together. A happy belated anniversary, Lauren.
Thank you. Sounds like a long time.
Hey, 12 years, it's more than a decade. So, a big aspect of today's episode, as I just said, was, getting into your own sort of connection with CIEE, which I've heard through the grapevine. Every time I mention Lauren's name, they're like, "Oh my gosh, like Lauren, teach abroad program, Lauren, program leader for high school abroad, one of the first one ever." So, it's kind of, it's an honor to kind of have an opportunity to connect with you now in my moment here as a CIEE staff member. And yeah, so thinking about that, just to kind of dive in, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about yourself, your relationship with CIEE, and then hopefully we'll, land into hearing a little bit more about your own CIEE love story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing to be back. I really do. I live down the street, so I didn't go far from the neighborhood in Alfalfa. So it's nice to be back and to also be around a familiar place always. But I came here, again, I started in September 2012. Studied abroad through CIEE because Northeastern didn't have a campus in Spain, and was studying international affairs in Spanish, so coming to Spain was obvious. And then I did a homestay in Triana, did the liberal arts program. I was in this classroom for the fall, so it's lots of memories here of learning also Spanish. And then as part of the program, we had a Grupo de Interés, our activity that we had that was Sevilla in the Americas. And so that was the beginning really of doing a lot of activities that really got me involved in the city and then also with CIEE. That's also where I met Sergio, one of my very good friends.
Huge shout out to Sergio.
Huge shout out.
for without Sergio, the show would be very difficult to create. So big shout out to Sergio.
Yep. I also would not be here if it weren't for Sergio because
even more love.
He's a big part of the end of this story and how I met my husband. But so a lot of that again was being here and studying abroad and just falling in love with the city, getting super immersed in the program, and through CIEE, honestly, taking advantage of every activity, traveling, going through the program. And then even after I did that, I went back to Boston and graduated and knew I wanted to come back. And there was a program to be a leader for high school students that also wanted to study abroad, but also there was a part of it that was also for volunteering. So we did 3 weeks in Sevilla and then a week in Morocco. And it was amazing. So I did that for 2 summers, came back, worked with CIEE in their flagship year, made some amazing relationships as well with high school students that have now come back as well to study abroad in Spain. And then once I graduated from Northeastern, I came back and I taught English for a year out in Écija.
Wow, that's actually where my dog's a rescue, and she's actually from Écija.
Well, she escaped
another
some
connection.
Heat. Yeah. Famously a really hot town right by
With a lot of towers, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I commuted, which again in Spain no one does for an hour every day there and back. But I did it, and that was also I did that through CIEE, the Teach in Spain program that they helped me have some placements there.
Amazing.
So a lot, really always always came back to Sevilla.
Full circle.
Totally.
We have a full circle CIEE moment here.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure, you know, as we've alluded to several times, there was more than CIEE that kept you interested in here.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit with us about your CIEE love connection.
The romance. Well, yeah. I mean, obviously coming back to Sevilla, even before I really had a romantic tag to it, was what I always wanted to do. But of course, having a person come back to was the draw as well. So actually, he also came through. He was more of the helper that came. He was, you know, more of like the Spaniards to make sure that we spoke Spanish. So
Right.
It was social. Again, also has a tie to Sergio because he's actually a good friend of Sergio's cousin. And so we would all go out, and as part of, again, our grupo de interés, and, you know, going to the Plaza de España and bikes and going out for a tapa. Obviously, then we all had to start conversation. And so he was one that every time I said something really well in Spanish, he would be super enthusiastic. And he's also probably why I have such a nice accent in Spanish.
You know, I think this is something possibly that is relatable between expats or folks who maybe Spanish isn't their first language. Where, you know, like when we meet each other here, you know, when Lauren and I first connected, we connected over WhatsApp, so we didn't really, you know, hear each other's voices. We were speaking in English, but
Right.
you know, then you meet when I met you today, really for the first time. All of a sudden, you know, the first sort of interaction we have is in Spanish,
Right.
and you know, it really is. I mean, it's a moment of also pride of being
Totally.
able to flex that muscle, to kind of flex that badge of, yeah, right? Like I've reached this linguistic point.
Totally.
And there are people along the way who get us to that point, you know?
Yeah.
So absolutely. It's kind of also another kind of like pin in the story where you keep mentioning your grupo de interés, you know, being able to really put yourself out there, going to the events with local folks, putting
Exposure.
yourself very much into that hot seat of, all right, well, it's my turn to get out there and to really work on those skills. So
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Positive reinforcement is also a huge part of any language learning. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is you put yourself out there and then you have a negative reaction with the way that you tried to speak or pronounce. So also being in an environment too in CIE where they really encourage you to always be speaking Spanish, always be testing and practicing and putting you in situations where you're going to do well when you speak, or that people aren't going to be rude about it, which I think in general Sevilla is actually quite nice about pronunciation.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
So yeah, but he was one of the people that definitely was always very enthusiastic. I can't believe how well you just said that. So obviously that's a person you want to be around.
For sure. It eases, and you know, I think beyond just, you know, connecting as people, there is sometimes a struggle for anybody who's learning a new language or in a new place, trying to have an immersive experience. So that is quite sweet.
Yeah,
that's very sweet. and then so y'all met in this kind of specific context, bettering your language.
Then obviously it became like, okay, now we're not going to meet up just because it's an activity that's organized for us. And obviously became very close with Sergio again. And so we would go out and then just as friends. And honestly, again, a little inside scoop, but it was always a group of friends. I had my eye on someone else actually in the group.
That's the tea right there, guys.
But it is. And then just as things kind of transformed, you know, obviously it was really only like 4.5 months that I was here. So of course my idea was never to get tied down, you know, at the end of it. But really by the time that it was like November, I remember we had Thanksgiving. I made a horrible Thanksgiving attempt. Again, at Sergio's house, I boiled a pumpkin.
Oh no!
I made a pumpkin pie from scratch. Do you know to peel a pumpkin, you have to boil it? You have to boil it, peel it, blend it. It was, I could have probably laid bricks with it. It was awful. But it was really that Thanksgiving evening that all of a sudden my attention shifted from one person to another. And then that was Donnie. And really ever since then, we right before we left, I was like, this can't be the end. I know I'm coming back to Sevilla however possible. So I'm not saying this is going to be long distance forever. So what do we do? And we tried, and we went long distance.
That's very heartwarming, because I also find that sometimes Thanksgiving is a big moment of culture shock for expats, for folks who are here. You know, we try to replicate the traditions that we have at home, and they most of the time fail.
If there's no canned pumpkin, don't do it.
Totally. You know, the oven is too small, the turkey doesn't fit, whatever it is.
It's also chicken.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, so it really touches my heart. And then also, you know, I think that, you know, the reality of you come here, you open yourself up, you feel a million things, you make connections, they impact you, and then you kind of get to this fork in the road where you say, okay, well, life goes on, and how do I make this reality, these experiences that are so real, how do I bring them with me, or what do I do with them moving forward? So, you know, I think that's a very relatable feeling for many people, this kind of question mark of, okay, well, now I have this, and where do I go with it? What do I do?
Right.
So I think that's probably really relatable to some folks. You know, you also happen to study abroad, it sounds like, in the fall. So, you know, it also is different when you don't have a summer in between. You know, when we've had students who are here studying in the spring, they fall in love, and then they stay here for all 3 sessions of the summer sessions, right? So they get credits, they're able to participate, they're able to stay for a little bit longer, and kind of, you know, put that at bay for a little bit.
Right.
So, you know, it sounds also like that time of year also kind of put you in that space to say, okay, well, how do we move forward? And it ended up bringing you back to Sevilla.
Yep.
In addition, it sounds like you're independent of that. Your deep love for Sevilla, for Spain.
It was already. I think the conversation about us being able to continue was because I already knew it was so clear that I was coming back.
Right.
So even that same thing, by the spring or by January, I already was applying to be the program leader for the Leadership Academy. So
awesome.
It was very cool.
It's so awesome. And then, you know, kind of thinking about the reality that y'all do come from 2 different worlds, and that you've created this unique world together. Thinking about sort of the interculturality of things, I'm wondering if you could maybe speak to that, share a little bit about, you know, what it's been like to kind of bridge this world between cultures, whether it's that, like, I don't know, a Groundhog Day, right? Like, beyond the movie, right? Like, okay, like, I don't know, I heard that Puxatawny Phil became a father this year, and I was like, this is the news that I needed. Oh my God. You know, like those like little niche, very sweet
amazing
things.
That you brought that up, because actually Groundhog Day is one of Donnie and I's favorite movies that we've watched together. And for Christmas, he bought my brother a sweatshirt that says Shadow Catcher and has the groundhog on it. It's amazing.
But it's true. It's like those sorts of things.
Yeah. I mean, luckily, first of all, I mean, there's whoever is familiar with the south of Spain and the culture in Sevilla, there's something about my humor, and I think also compatibility with Americans. Yeah. I'm going to generalize, but that I really tap into. And there was something too about how my humor and what we related to. But Donnie, when I met him, I mean, the first 3 years of our relationship were exclusively in Spanish. He spoke zero
That's amazing.
English. So it was a lot, obviously, of me already knowing so much more about his culture versus him mine. And then also I was always here. So we were very much always in his space. But we had our friends and had our network, especially through even my friends again through CIE. We immediately moved in together because what was I going to do? Live alone? Well, he also lived alone in the same city. And that I thought was much more unexpected, you know, things about the culture of like when we eat and, you know, American culture also, it is exported very well and imported into Spain. So there's a lot of that context too of holidays and things like that that are a lot easier to explain. And there's a lot less idiosyncrasies compared to
for sure
Sevilla.
Yeah.
Here, you know, learning about Holy Week, learning about Feria, learning about, you know, a lot of dynamics in a small town versus the city that took effort and interest on my part. And it was, I think, a little bit, again, it was more challenging the day to day of like, what pot do we use? Yeah. You know, oh, well, your mom used to cook in that pan, mine used to cook. Honestly, we had the stupidest fights that were more about, again, cohabitating. It
needs to be a wooden spoon.
The wooden spoon. So yeah, so we did. We had more arguments that were intercultural about like day-to-day things. that, and then of course the going out, and when going out means. Does it have to, is the sun up the next day by the time I see you again when you come home, or, the timing of things like that socially. But it was and then the interesting part was, after years of being in our relationship, Donnie and I moved back to Boston for a year. I was working, and he got his master's in Boston.
Wow.
And learned English, and then did a master's in English weeks after getting his IELTS that he needed. And meeting someone again in a different language is very crazy psychologically, because you have your personality in one language and you have another personality in another. So that was very cool, almost meeting him again, but in English, having him have to use my words to express what I know that he could have done in a different way in Spanish.
Completely. And that's so beautiful and also so true. I feel like this is actually a point that we might feel very deeply, but we can't always articulate, especially with our loved ones.
Super challenging.
Especially when we are in these like plurilingual relationships, right? So I appreciate how articulate you were in that. It's a beautiful thing, and sometimes strange and refreshing and challenging, and also kind of scary to meet somebody in a new language.
It is.
Your level of being able to express yourself emotionally on a very basic point. I'm a genius when it comes to physics, but I can't talk about that in a different language, right?
Right.
So I love the way that you articulated that, and that's just really beautiful. And I appreciate you opening up and sharing that with us, because I do think that so many of these points are so relatable.
Yeah.
And to have somebody make it intelligible, I think is quite special. So I really appreciate that as somebody who lives and navigates my life, my friendships, my romances completely in that way. And I mean, it makes me feel seen. It makes me feel witnessed. And, I don't know, I'm a single person, I'm a young person.
Yeah.
And, I think that it's healthy. It's good to hear. We don't have these conversations as much as I think I would like. So I appreciate that, really.
Absolutely.
And then I'm thinking about, for example, like, are there any traditions that you have brought from your home, your family, that you're like, we've got to do this. We have to, like any things that you're a stickler for in regards of like, this is my tradition and let's make it ours, but like, we're going to do it here in Seville.
Yeah. Thanksgiving honestly it's one of my favorites. It's definitely, in my family, we celebrate it a lot. I haven't been home for Thanksgiving for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And so I've done that before. I've done a big Friendsgiving. It took a lot, and we did have that Taste of America store that has now gone, which I'm very annoyed about.
They have an online store, but it seems like it doesn't really work.
Yeah, so I've done that. So I've really tried to bring and also impart on, I have amazing friends as well now that are also from Donnie's town, and then also in Sevilla, because they're interested as well in the way that I celebrate things, just as I've been interested in the way they celebrate things.
It's mutual.
So I think the biggest ones for us, for sure, are Thanksgiving. Traditions about like Christmas movies, like we will watch Elf after Thanksgiving, but only after the holiday has to be seen as well. And whatever I say or think about Jude Law out loud does not reflect negatively on our marriage, but he has to agree. And so no, but then otherwise, other major holidays we haven't truly taken over. I'm thinking like in the summer, we don't care about 4th of July that much, but if we're in the States, we can.
It's hot here, to be honest.
It is hot
it's
here.
Very hot. I feel like it kind of gets lost in the mix of it all.
Right. So, we do the tradition of leaving in August, but we go to the States, so we take advantage of that.
Right.
But I would say they're little things. And we really try to adapt a little bit on the way that we live, but at the same time, I really like how things are done here. So it's, so we've definitely adapted more, I think. But there are little moments too of where he understands now where I'm coming from and kind of what adjustments we need. But celebrating all of the holidays possible. We definitely, the 25th is always, we celebrate it at home. We live up in New Hampshire, my family's house. So we'll celebrate with the snow, and we'll do that for the 25th. And then we're always here for the Three Kings, for the Epiphany.
So beautiful also that I feel that I feel that Spanish culture, Spanish life, there are so many beautiful holidays. There are so many opportunities to be around the table with family. And I think it really is a huge advantage, let's put it that way,
Absolutely.
to be able to have, to be able to split time to say, okay, we are in the States or we're wherever we are for the 25th, and then we celebrate King's Day on the 6th.
Because there's less really on our side.
Right.
We
have a shorter vacation.
Right. I mean, I am Catholic, so I celebrate Christmas. Yeah. So we don't have any other extended holidays. So it's really the two, which also traditionally in the U.S. is what you hear. Like, well, what do you do for the holidays? And you only bring up, we go to his for Thanksgiving and we go to mine for Christmas, and then we swap. But there's nothing else. Like Easter doesn't come up as much, right. And so there's a bit of that, which matters more.
Spain always giving us the most. This is the
absolutely.
bottom line. Spain is always, especially southern Spain, always
correct
with the energy.
Doesn't mean we don't work though. Don't buy into that stereotype.
Absolutely not. We are working right now. No. But anyways, thank you so much for sharing. And on that note, I'm wondering if there was anything unexpected that came out of getting to know each other, moving to Sevilla, your relationship. You've spoken a lot. So if there's not, we can gloss over, but I'm curious.
Yeah. I mean, unexpected. Probably a million things, but it's, again, there's something that was really, I don't know, that when you're, luckily, I mean, not being a therapist at all, but when you are in a stable relationship, there were so many things that did come up that I think were challenging, but we knew that we would figure it out. I mean, what was unexpected, I guess, is the decision. I got my MBA in Madrid, and I wasn't ever really expecting to go for a master's or obviously after like a graduate degree. But there was something that I wanted to do, and I also loved the experience of studying. And so doing it at a higher level and still in Spain, I think also was really helpful. And then it was like another study abroad experience, but with people who also, I mean, obviously here you come to study and people are in undergrad, but we weren't that serious about studying.
It's a different phase. It's a different moment.
Right.
You show
and
up
so
differently.
I went back and got my grad degree when I was 28.
Right.
And so meeting people now, 8 years after I studied abroad that are adults that also want to be international was really cool again to do that. So although that wasn't necessarily from my relationship, it obviously we did it so we could be back in Spain.
You're yourself also in that. I think this is beyond just a conversation of how you've met your life partner. It's the matter of, okay, well, your life has totally changed. Okay?
Right.
So I think that I really value that and I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Very quickly, I wanted to pop into a little sidebar to say that we connected with another CIEE alum, and I wanted to read her answers about her experience related to these questions.
Amazing.
So I sent her these questions. I said, "What year did you meet your partner and how?" So this person, her name is Elena. She said, "I met my partner in fall of 2001. I made a last-minute decision to study abroad before graduating from college. I threw my application together and decided on Seville, Spain. The CIEE office was housed in the University of Sevilla building. CIEE had organized a language exchange with many of the students in the University of Seville program, and decided I was similarly interested in improving my Spanish. Basically, there was a list of 100 students on a clipboard, name, number, and maybe email, and basically, I randomly pick a name, gave the student 3 calls, left a message, and never heard back. A week with no response, I chose another name, my future husband." Wow, loved that turn.
Wow.
The next question I asked was about falling in love with someone from a different country, a different culture. What was the most unexpected thing for you about that experience? She said, his family. I was so anxious about wanting to make a positive impression on his family, especially his parents, wanting to fit in with the cultural norms, dress, and behavior. I could never figure out, and still can't, the cultural rule regarding wearing pantyhose.
I knew she was going to say that. That's so crazy. I was just thinking, it's the tights. It's the tights.
It totally is.
Don't you dare show a bare leg whenever. Oh, it's August? Doesn't matter. Put them on.
That is very, very, very on point. That is great. She also said raising kids and the input from the in-laws was also sometimes a struggle. It's also been a bit of a shock to the system, the amount of money we've spent over the years flying to the U.S. to see family. They're a family of 5 also. Oh. And the last question that I asked her was, now that you've been in Spain for many years, what's it been like building a life here with your partner? She said, I wouldn't change it for the world. I have almost spent as many years in Spain as in the US. Do I consider myself Spanish? Not at all, but also I don't feel completely North American either, given that I've spent almost 20 years in Spain. Nevertheless, it's been really important to me passing on some of those American traditions to my kids and to anyone who would like to experience them. My kids are more excited about Thanksgiving than I am. Halloween and trick-or-treating has become a tradition in my Spanish neighborhood. Santa makes a stop at my house, as does the Easter Bunny. I consider my children blessed to have what I see as the best of both worlds, the culture and traditions from both countries, not to mention English and Spanish language fluency. Wow, that really is such a, and that's a really nice way to kind of wrap up our conversation.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I think that there's so much depth when we talk about human experience, and I think it's a beautiful thing to take the risk to discover yourself, to leave your home, to immerse yourself in a new culture, and to take that leap of faith. And I think that in so many ways it surprises us. And, you know, I feel super like warm and fuzzy about hearing about your experience, about reading these beautiful accounts.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that one of the things that really is the big like takeaway in the magic that I think CIEE does is that opening doors with education, opening doors to understanding each other across worlds, really does change the world, because it changes our worlds and we show up
totally
in the world, right? So, you know, one other thing before we go is I'm wondering if, thinking about, you know, making connections, getting to know people, whether it's for language purposes, it's friendship, it's romance, how would you recommend that folks put themselves out of their comfort zone into the world to kind of take that chance, whether it's platonically, romantically? What would you recommend? How should people get out and about here in Seville to make those connections?
I mean, I think it's like the best city to do it, because there are so many things that people are so passionate about and so interested in that if you open up a little bit of a window of, oh, will you tell me more about that? Or if you know something already and you express some interest, I think people are really always eager to talk about what they're passionate about. And honestly, in Sevilla, there's a lot of activity. There's sports. There's
Such an oferta always.
Totally. There are a lot of classes. I'm joining a hip hop class. I'm starting tomorrow. So, but I mean, there's life in the street at all times. Yeah. There's the culture of just getting out and being in a bar, being at a restaurant where it's always informal. I always end up talking to the table next door, and I'm normally with my husband, but you end up talking or chatting, or you overhear something, and people are very open and love to have a good time. So I think putting yourself out there and not being afraid to start a conversation. I've made friends, same thing, in like a Pilates class or random, but as soon as you open up and relate, and asking questions always, because I think that's the most amazing thing too about being abroad or being somewhere where you actually have the opportunity to learn something more. There's usually always a reason behind why is that a tradition, why is that an expression, why is that a cultural thing, and the reason definitely might surprise you, and then might allow you to learn a little bit more and relate to someone, and then that could of course create a friendship or something more.
Don't shy away.
Exactly.
Really, don't shy away. Take that risk. Ask the question. I always encourage students, when there's some sort of whatever, it's like there's a doubt, there's a question, there's curiosity, lean in, say, that's so curious. Can you tell me more about that?
The expression is just be a total sin vergüenza. Have no shame.
Absolutely.
No shame.
Amazing. And I think Lauren and I also agree that a plan to hang out by the river is always a great plan.
People do that on them, on their own, and so go where the people go.
Exactly. It's good to be an observer and to say, okay, well, what's happening here? To go, don't shy away, put yourself out there. And you never know. You might end up back working with CIEE. You might end up living in Seville. You might end up in a completely multicultural, bilingual, beautiful, beautiful life.
Totally.
So thank you so much for sharing your beautiful story with us, and happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day.
And happy anniversary once again. 12 years is a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for being on air with us.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks for listening, everybody. I want to thank you. This is a special episode for Valentine's Day. I want to give a special thanks to Sergio for working on production with me, and a big shout out to everybody who's been involved in the special recording of this episode, like Lauren and beyond. Thanks for listening. Until next time.